Commander Alex Reed stood on the observation deck of Orbital Defense Station Epsilon, watching the stars. 20 years of service in the Earth Defense Fleet hadn't prepared him for this moment. The unidentified object had appeared 3 days ago, moving slowly toward Earth, ignoring all hails and warnings. "Any response to our messages?" Reed asked, not taking his eyes off the view screen. Lieutenant James shook his head. "Nothing, sir. It's maintaining course and speed. Estimated arrival in Earth orbit in 45 minutes. Reed rubbed his chin, feeling the stubble from too many hours on duty. The object was smooth and oval, with no visible engines or weapons, roughly the size of an old aircraft carrier. Its surface reflected light in ways that made it difficult to focus on. "Deploy scout drones," Reed ordered. "Keep them at a safe distance. I want eyes on that thing from all angles." "Yes, sir," James replied, his fingers moving quickly across the control panel. Reed watched as 6 small drones detached from the station and moved toward the alien vessel. The knot in his stomach tightened. Humanity had always wondered if they were alone in the universe. Today, they were about to find out. "Drones in position, sir," James reported. "Transmitting visual feed now." The main screen filled with images of the alien craft. Up close, its surface wasn't smooth at all but covered in intricate patterns that seemed to shift and change as they watched. "What in the world?" Reed muttered. Suddenly, sections of the alien vessel began to move, panels sliding open to reveal what could only be weapon ports. Before Reed could react, bright beams of energy shot out, destroying 4 of the 6 drones instantly. "Red alert!" Reed shouted. "All personnel to battle stations. Contact Fleet Command immediately." The station's alarms blared as crew members raced to their positions. Reed grabbed the communication system. "This is Commander Reed of Orbital Station Epsilon to unidentified vessel. Cease hostile actions immediately, or we will be forced to respond." The alien ship gave no indication it had heard the warning. Instead, it accelerated toward Earth, more weapon ports opening along its hull. "Sir, Fleet Command reports similar vessels appearing near all orbital stations," James said, his voice tight with fear. "They're under attack." Reed's mind raced. This wasn't first contact. It was an invasion. "Arm all defensive systems," Reed ordered, "and prepare escape pods for evacuation." Before the weapons could be brought online, the alien vessel fired again. The station rocked violently as the first hit struck them. Warning lights flashed across all control panels. "Hull breach in sections 3 through 7. Someone shouted. "We're losing atmosphere." "Get everyone to the escape pods," Reed commanded. "Now." As his crew scrambled to evacuate, Reed stayed at the communication station, broadcasting on all frequencies. "This is an emergency alert to all Earth defense stations and ground bases. We are under attack by unknown alien forces. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill." Another blast hit the station, knocking Reed off his feet. The lights flickered and died, replaced by dim emergency lighting. Through the observation window, he could see other defense stations burning against the blackness of space. "Commander, we need to go," James shouted, grabbing Reed's arm. "Last pod is waiting." Reed took one final look at the view screen. The alien vessel had moved past them, heading directly for Earth. In the distance, he could see more ships appearing, dozens of them, emerging from what looked like tears in the fabric of space itself. As Reed raced for the escape pod, a terrible realization hit him. Earth's orbital defenses were the planet's first and strongest line of protection, and they were being wiped out in minutes. The last escape pod launched just as Station Epsilon exploded behind them. Through the small window, Reed watched his home planet growing larger, beautiful and blue, and completely unaware of what was coming. The invasion of Earth had begun. Major Tom Wilson squinted through his binoculars at the dark shapes descending through the clouds. 3 days had passed since the orbital stations went silent. 3 days of chaos, confusion, and mounting dread. "How many?" asked Corporal Davis, crouched beside him in the rubble of what had once been downtown Denver. "At least 5 dropships," Wilson replied, lowering the binoculars. "Bigger than the ones yesterday." Wilson's unit had been reduced from 30 soldiers to 12. They'd spent the first day trying to evacuate civilians, the second day attempting to fight back, and now the third day simply trying to survive. He keyed his radio. "All units, fall back to position Charlie. I repeat, fall back to Charlie." Static answered him. The aliens had done something to most communication systems. Only short-range radios still worked, and even those were spotty. "Sir, look." Davis pointed at the lead dropship, which had opened its underside, releasing dozens of smaller objects that floated down like deadly snowflakes. Wilson raised his binoculars again. "They're not bombs," he said, surprised. "They look like scanners of some kind." The small devices spread out, hovering about 10 feet above the ground, emitting faint blue lights that swept back and forth across the ruined city. "They're looking for survivors," Wilson realized. "Everyone, stay down and keep quiet." His remaining soldiers pressed themselves deeper into the rubble. Wilson watched as one of the scanning devices moved closer to their position, its blue light methodically sweeping the area. Suddenly, a cry rang out from a building across the street. A young boy, no more than 10, had emerged from hiding and was running toward what looked like a destroyed emergency vehicle. The scanner immediately changed color, pulsing red, and made a high-pitched sound. Within seconds, 2 alien soldiers appeared, moving with frightening speed on long, insect-like limbs. Wilson raised his rifle but hesitated. They were too far away for an accurate shot, and firing would give away their position. The aliens reached the boy, who screamed as one grabbed him with a multi-jointed arm. The creature tilted its head, studying the child with large, faceted eyes that glittered in the dusty light. Wilson couldn't watch any longer. "Cover me," he whispered, and before Davis could stop him, he was moving, keeping low among the debris. The aliens were distracted, examining the boy. Wilson got within 30 yards before one of them sensed his presence, turning with alarming quickness. Wilson fired 3 shots. The first 2 hit the alien holding the boy, causing it to release the child and stumble backward. The third shot missed as the second alien moved with blinding speed, disappearing behind a wrecked car. "Run," Wilson shouted to the boy, who stood frozen in terror. "Run to me." The child snapped out of his paralysis and sprinted toward Wilson. Behind him, the wounded alien made a high, keening sound that echoed through the empty streets. The second alien reappeared on Wilson's left, too close. He swung his rifle around but knew he'd be too late. 3 shots rang out from the ruins where Davis and the others were hiding. The alien jerked and fell, green fluid spraying from wounds in its elongated torso. Wilson grabbed the boy and ran back to their hiding place as more alien cries filled the air. The dropships were changing course, heading toward their position. "We've got maybe 2 minutes," Wilson said, breathing hard. "Grab what you can and move out." As they retreated through the city's sewer system, the boy clung to Wilson's hand. "My parents," he whispered. "The aliens took them yesterday." Wilson squeezed the child's hand but said nothing. He'd seen the collection centers, where humans were herded into the larger ships. No one who went in had come out. That night, sheltered in an abandoned subway tunnel, Wilson's team captured an injured alien soldier separated from its unit. As they secured it with cable ties, Wilson studied the creature's strange anatomy and the odd symbols on its armor. For the first time, they had a chance to learn about their enemy, the beings that humans would later know as the Vorn, who had come to claim Earth as their own. 6 months after the initial attack, Commander Alex Reed barely recognized himself in the cracked mirror. His once neat uniform had been replaced by mismatched civilian clothes, reinforced with scavenged body armor. A jagged scar ran from his left temple to his jaw, a souvenir from a close encounter with the Vorn patrol. "They're waiting for you," said a voice behind him. Reed turned to see Major Wilson standing in the doorway of the small room they had carved out of the mountain. The mountain base, once a government disaster shelter, now housed over 300 survivors, one of the largest resistance cells still operating. "How's our guest?" Reed asked, following Wilson down the narrow corridor. "Still alive. Dr. Morgan thinks she's made a breakthrough in understanding their language." They entered a larger chamber where maps covered the walls, lit by solar-powered LED strips. Around a central table stood the core of their resistance group. Dr. Lisa Morgan, the xenobiologist, Ben Foster, a former communications engineer, and Ellie Wright, who had been a high school teacher before becoming their chief intelligence officer. "Our radio network picked up something interesting," Foster said without preamble. 3 more resistance groups made contact last night, one in the Rockies, one in what's left of Chicago, and one operating out of the Florida Everglades. "That makes 14 confirmed cells," Wright added, marking the map, "plus at least 20 unconfirmed reports." Reed studied the markings, feeling a small spark of hope. For months after the invasion, surviving human groups had been isolated, unable to coordinate. The old internet was gone, satellites destroyed, and most modern communications jammed by Vorn technology. But humans were nothing if not adaptable. "The old ham radio network is almost fully operational," Foster said proudly. "The Vorn don't seem to monitor those frequencies, probably consider the technology too primitive to bother with." "Their mistake," Reed said. "What about the processing facilities?" Morgan stepped forward, pointing to several red circles on the map. "We've identified 18 major sites where they're extracting Earth's minerals and biological materials. This one in the former Yellowstone Park seems to be the largest in North America." "They're stripping our planet," Wilson said grimly. "Not just stripping it," Morgan corrected. "Based on what we've learned from our captive, they're cataloging everything. Every plant, animal, microbe. Earth's biodiversity is apparently unique and valuable." Reed leaned over the table, examining the nearest processing facility marked on the map. "What about their ships? Any weak points identified?" Morgan nodded, pushing forward a crude drawing. "Their command vessels maintain a specific communication pattern with ground forces. If we could intercept and decode it, we could potentially tap into their entire network," Foster finished, eyes bright with excitement. "Exactly," Morgan said, "but we'd need access to a command ship." The room fell silent as everyone considered the implications. Attacking a Vorn ground patrol was dangerous enough. Reaching a command ship seemed impossible. Wilson cleared his throat. 6 weeks ago, we wouldn't have considered capturing a Vorn soldier. Now we have one. 3 months ago, we couldn't even communicate between cities. Now we have a continental network." Reed looked around at the faces watching him, tired, scared, but determined. Outside this room were hundreds more survivors, each with their own stories of loss and narrow escapes. And beyond this mountain were thousands more, perhaps millions, fighting and hiding and surviving. The Vorn came here expecting to find a primitive species they could easily harvest and displace, Reed said slowly. "They didn't expect us to fight back. They certainly didn't expect us to organize." He straightened up, decision made. "We need intelligence from a command ship, so let's figure out how to get on one." For the first time in months, Reed felt something beyond the constant fear and rage that had driven him since watching Earth's defenses fall. He felt purpose. The Vorn had made a critical error in their calculation. They had attacked humanity's home, but they hadn't managed to break humanity's spirit. "We start planning tomorrow," Reed said, looking at each face in turn. "The Vorn think they've won. It's time we showed them they've barely begun to fight." Dr. Lisa Morgan held her breath as she carefully extracted a thin filament from the captured Vorn neural device. Under the makeshift microscope, the alien technology looked both familiar and utterly foreign, crystalline structures interwoven with something that resembled organic tissue. "That's the last connection," she murmured, mostly to herself. The small team of resistance fighters crowding her lab remained silent, watching her work with a mixture of hope and anxiety. For 3 weeks, Morgan had been studying the neural communicator they'd recovered from a raid on a Vorn outpost. The device was part of the system all Vorn soldiers used to maintain contact with their command structure. "Ready for the test," she announced, connecting the final wire to their cobbled-together human technology. "Power it up, but slowly." Foster turned a dial, and the alien device hummed to life, emitting a soft blue glow. Strange symbols appeared on their modified computer screen. "It's working," Foster exclaimed. "We're receiving their communications." Morgan allowed herself a small smile. "Not just receiving. If I'm right, we can use this to track their command signals back to the source." The door to the lab opened, and Commander Reed entered with Major Wilson close behind. Both men looked exhausted but alert. "Tell me you have good news," Reed said. Morgan gestured to the screen. "We can track their communications now. But I found something else." She pointed to a small nodule on the device. "This component connects directly to their nervous system. The Vorn don't just communicate with technology, they integrate with it." "And that helps us how?" Wilson asked. "It means they're vulnerable," Morgan explained. "Their neural network is both their greatest strength and their greatest weakness. Disrupt the network, and we disrupt the Vorn," Reed finished, understanding dawning on his face. Foster had been studying the incoming data. "Commander, I'm picking up something big. Increased communications, new command patterns." They gathered around the screen as Foster translated the alien symbols they'd managed to decode. "They're talking about a scout ship," he said slowly. "Scheduled to land about 30 miles from here tomorrow night for some kind of atmospheric sampling." Reed and Wilson exchanged looks. "A scout ship would have access to the Vorn network," Reed said, "and could potentially reach their command vessels," Wilson added. "It's risky," Morgan warned. "The scout ships are small, usually 3 or 4 Vorn crew members." "We've handled worse odds," Wilson said grimly. The next night, under the cover of darkness, Reed led a small team through the dense forest. The Vorn scout ship had landed in a clearing, just as their intelligence had indicated. Its smooth surface glowed faintly in the moonlight. "Remember," Reed whispered to his team, "we need the ship intact, and at least one of them alive." They waited until 2 Vorn exited the vessel, collecting samples from the surrounding area. The resistance fighters moved silently, using the neural disruptors Morgan had developed. The devices emitted a focused pulse that temporarily overloaded the Vorn neural system. The attack was swift and successful. Both Vorn fell before they could alert their ship. Wilson led a second team into the vessel itself, where they subdued the pilot using the same technology. "Ship secured," Wilson reported through his radio. "1 prisoner, as requested. You better get in here, Commander. You need to see this." Inside the scout ship, Reed found Wilson at what appeared to be the main control interface. "Look at these star charts," Wilson said, pointing to a holographic display. "They've mapped our entire solar system." Reed studied the display, noticing highlighted points throughout Earth's orbit and beyond. "They're not just here for resources," Reed realized. "Earth is some kind of special project." Further examination of the ship's database revealed the terrible truth. Earth had been targeted specifically for its unique biological diversity. The Vorn were a species that consumed worlds, harvesting everything useful before moving on. And they had marked humanity as nothing more than an inconvenient native species to be relocated or eliminated. But they had also revealed something crucial: the location of their command structure, and more importantly, the coordinates of the Vorn homeworld. As the resistance fighters prepared to move the captured ship to their hidden base, Reed looked at the alien star charts with grim determination. The Vorn had made a critical mistake. They had attacked humanity's home while providing the very means for humanity to strike back. The mountain base buzzed with activity as resistance members prepared for what they called Operation Pushback. 3 months had passed since they captured the Vorn scout ship, and everything had changed. Dr. Morgan stood in the command center, surrounded by screens showing feeds from resistance cells across the globe. "The neural virus is ready," she announced, holding up a small device that pulsed with soft green light. Once uploaded to their network, it should disrupt Vorn communications for approximately 6 hours. Reed nodded, impressed with how far they'd come. Using the captured scout ship, they had learned to navigate the Vorn communication systems and had made contact with resistance groups on every continent. For the first time since the invasion, humanity was coordinating on a global scale. 6 hours is all we need," Wilson said, studying the tactical display. "Simultaneous attacks on all major Vorn facilities, starting with their processing centers." Foster entered the room, excitement visible on his face despite his exhaustion. "Commander, you need to see this." He tapped a series of commands, bringing up a new image on the main screen. "We just intercepted this from their orbital communications." The screen showed a massive ship, unlike any Vorn vessel they'd seen before. It dwarfed the invasion craft, its surface adorned with intricate patterns that seemed to shift and pulse with energy. "What am I looking at?" Reed asked. "According to the communication logs, that's the Vorn Supreme Command vessel," Foster explained. "Their leader is personally coming to Earth to deal with what they're calling the human problem." A murmur ran through the room. The resistance had been growing, becoming bolder in their attacks, but they hadn't realized they'd done enough damage to warrant such attention. Wilson laughed, the sound sharp in the tense room. "They're worried about us." "They should be," Morgan said, her voice quiet but firm. "The biological samples we've studied show the Vorn have never encountered significant resistance before. They've evolved to consume, not to fight." Reed studied the image of the command ship, an idea forming. "How long until it reaches Earth?" 3 days, Foster replied. Reed turned to his team, determination in his eyes. "Then we move now. We don't wait for them to bring in reinforcements." The next day, as the morning sun rose over what remained of Earth's cities, the Resistance launched their coordinated attack. Using the Vorn's own technology against them, human fighters struck processing centers in North America, Europe, Asia, and Africa simultaneously. In the skies above former New York City, Reed piloted the captured scout ship, leading a small fleet of modified human aircraft. Their target, a Vorn battleship that controlled the eastern seaboard operations. "Neural virus deployed," Morgan reported through the communication system. Her voice came through clearly now, thanks to the Resistance's reclaimed satellite network. Across the globe, Vorn soldiers and machines suddenly faltered as their neural commands became scrambled. Resistance fighters, who had been preparing for this moment for months, surged forward. Reed watched from the scout ship as Wilson led ground forces into the New York Processing Center. On his tactical display, similar scenes played out worldwide, humans reclaiming their planet one facility at a time. "They're launching countermeasures," Foster warned, monitoring the Vorn communications that were still functioning. "The battleship is deploying fighters." Reed gripped the alien controls, which had been modified for human use. "All aircraft, engage defensive patterns. Remember your training." The sky filled with Vorn fighter craft, their movements erratic due to the neural disruption. The human pilots, flying a mix of captured alien vessels and retrofitted Earth aircraft, moved to intercept. For the first time since the invasion began, the battle seemed evenly matched. Without their perfect neural coordination, the Vorn pilots were vulnerable to human ingenuity and adaptability. Reed targeted the battleship's command center, firing the scout ship's weapons with precision, born from months of practice. The energy beams struck true, causing explosions along the larger vessel's hull. "Main systems hit," Reed called out. "Ground team, prepare to board." As Wilson's team fought their way through the processing center below, Reed led the aerial assault on the crippled battleship. After nearly a year of being hunted on their own planet, humans were taking the fight directly to their invaders. And in deep space, unaware of the changing tide of battle, the Vorn Supreme Commander approached Earth, expecting to find a subdued planet, not a rebellion gaining strength with every passing hour. 2 days after the global offensive began, Commander Reed stood on the bridge of the captured Vorn battleship, now renamed Defiance. Around him, a crew of resistance fighters operated alien technology that had been hastily modified for human use. "Status report," Reed called out, studying the tactical display that showed Earth and its surrounding space. "Neural disruption is holding at 70% effectiveness," Morgan reported from her station. The doctor had barely slept since deploying her virus, working constantly to counter foreign attempts to break through. "We've got maybe 12 more hours before they adapt completely." "Ground operations have secured 63% of major Vorn facilities," Wilson added. He had returned from leading the New York assault just hours ago, his face streaked with dirt and dried blood. "Resistance cells report similar success worldwide." Foster looked up from the communications array. "The Vorn's Supreme Command Vessel has accelerated. New estimated arrival, 3 hours." Reed absorbed this information, aware that everything they had accomplished could still be undone. The battleship they had captured was powerful, but nothing compared to the approaching command vessel. They needed to act quickly. "Show me our fleet status," Reed ordered. The tactical display shifted, revealing the positions of all captured Vorn ships and modified human vessels. It was an impressive sight. Over 40 spacecraft of various sizes gathered in Earth orbit. More were joining hourly as ground teams secured additional Vorn vessels. "Not bad for a primitive species," Wilson remarked with grim humor. Reed nodded. "We'll need every ship. The command vessel won't be coming alone." The plan was desperate but simple. Rather than wait for the Supreme Commander to arrive with reinforcements, they would take their fleet out to meet it, hopefully catching the Vorn leader by surprise. "All ships, prepare for jump," Reed ordered. The Vorn used a form of faster-than-light travel that human scientists were still struggling to understand, but the resistance fighters had learned to operate it through trial and error. As the fleet prepared to depart Earth orbit, Reed addressed the crew. "We're about to face the most powerful Vorn vessel in existence. They don't expect us to attack. They don't believe we have the courage or the capability. Today, we proved them wrong." The jump was disorienting, a brief sensation of stretching, followed by a sudden snap back to normal as the fleet emerged near the orbit of Mars. Ahead of them, the massive Vorn command vessel had just entered the solar system, flanked by a dozen smaller craft. "They've spotted us," Foster reported tensely. "They're trying to re-establish neural communication with their ground forces." Morgan smiled. "Let them try. The virus is evolving faster than they can counter it." "All ships, attack formation," Reed commanded. "Target their escort vessels first." The human fleet surged forward, weapons firing. The Vorn escorts, caught unprepared for such a coordinated assault, scattered in confusion. 3 were destroyed in the initial volley. The Supreme Command Vessel, however, was formidable. It returned fire, energy beams slicing through 2 captured scout ships. "Press the attack," Reed ordered as the Defiance shuddered under enemy fire. "All ships, concentrate on their propulsion systems." The battle raged across the void of space, human determination against Vorn technology. Losses mounted on both sides, but the resistance fighters fought with the desperate courage of those defending their home. "Their shields are weakening," Wilson reported after a particularly effective attack run. "We have an opening." Reed made the decision instantly. "Boarding teams, prepare for deployment. We're taking that ship." Using the tactics they had perfected during months of guerrilla warfare, Reed led a small team aboard the Vorn command vessel. They fought their way through alien corridors, facing increasingly desperate resistance as they approached the command center. Finally, they breached the central chamber. Inside, surrounded by guards, stood a Vorn unlike any they had seen before, larger with ornate patterns covering its exoskeleton. "The Supreme Commander." The alien spoke, its words translated through devices the resistance had developed. "You cannot hope to defeat us. We have consumed 1,000 worlds. Your species is nothing." Reed stepped forward, plasma rifle raised. Behind him stood Wilson, Morgan, and a dozen fighters who had survived months of occupation and battle. "You made one mistake," Wilson said, his voice steady. "You attacked our home." The Supreme Commander recoiled, perhaps finally understanding that the primitive creatures it had so casually invaded were not going to surrender. Not now. Not ever. 1 year after the battle aboard the Vorn Supreme Command vessel, Alex Reed stood at the observation window of the newly constructed Unity Station. Earth spread out below him, a patchwork of blue oceans, green forests, and the gray of recovering cities. "Hard to believe how much has changed," Wilson said, joining him at the window. The former major now served as Earth's defense coordinator, overseeing the global security network created from modified Vorn technology. Reed nodded. "Even harder to believe we won." The victory had not come easily. The battle aboard the command vessel had been brutal, with heavy losses on both sides. But when the Supreme Commander fell, the Vorn invasion force had fractured. Without their central leadership and neural network, the aliens had struggled to maintain coordination. "Dr. Morgan is ready for the demonstration," Wilson said. "You should see what her team has accomplished." They made their way through the station to a large laboratory where Morgan waited, surrounded by a mix of human and Vorn technology. The captured ship's database had provided humanity with scientific knowledge beyond their wildest dreams. "Commander Reed, right on time," Morgan greeted him. She looked different now, more confident, her eyes bright with excitement rather than haunted by fear. "We're ready to activate the perimeter." She gestured to a display showing the solar system. Small dots of light appeared around Earth, then expanded outward past the Moon, Mars, Jupiter, and beyond, until they encircled the entire system. "The defense network is online," Morgan announced. "Any ship entering our solar system will be detected immediately. And if they're hostile." She pressed another control, and simulated energy beams connected the dots, forming a protective web. "From defended to defender in just 1 year," Wilson said with pride. "Not bad." Reed studied the display, thinking of all that represented. The Vorn technology had been adapted and improved upon by human engineers and scientists working together across national boundaries that no longer seemed important. "What about the communication beacon?" Reed asked. Morgan smiled. "That's the best part." She activated another display, showing a message being broadcast in multiple formats, including the Vorn neural code they had deciphered. "We're letting the galaxy know that Earth is protected, and that we're open to peaceful contact." The door to the lab slid open, and Foster entered with an excited expression. "It worked. We just received a response to the beacon." The room fell silent. Despite everything they had accomplished, this was the moment many had been waiting for. Confirmation that there were other civilizations out there, hopefully more peaceful than the Vorn. "It's from a coalition of species calling themselves the Galactic Concord," Foster explained, transferring the data to the main display. "They've been monitoring the Vorn expansion for centuries, but lacked the military strength to intervene. They're requesting diplomatic contact." Reed read the translated message, amazed at how routine this moment felt after everything they had endured. "Tell them we welcome peaceful dialogue." Later that day, Reed addressed the Unity Council, the governing body formed after the war to coordinate Earth's reconstruction and defense. "The Vorn attacked us because they thought we were weak," Reed said to the assembled representatives from every region of Earth. "They saw our divisions, our conflicts, and assumed we would fall easily. Instead, we showed them, and now the galaxy, what humans do when our home is threatened." He looked at the faces before him. Former enemies who had become allies, strangers who had become family, all united by shared struggle and triumph. "We have sent warning beacons throughout our system. We have established contact with peaceful civilizations. We have taken our place among the stars, not as conquerors, but as defenders. The Vorn Collective has sent peace envoys, seeking to understand how a primitive species defeated their greatest commanders." Reed paused, remembering the dark days after the invasion, when hope seemed lost. "What we tell them is simple. You should never attack someone's home unless you're prepared for them to fight with everything they have. As the council meeting concluded, Reed returned to the observation window, watching as the first diplomatic vessel from the Galactic Concord approached Earth. The ship moved cautiously, respecting the boundaries established by the defense network. From invaded world to respected power, from isolated planet to galactic participant, humanity had emerged stronger than anyone could have imagined. And the stars, once seeming so distant and unreachable, now represented not a barrier but a highway to humanity's future. The last words the Vorn had wanted to hear, "You attacked our home," had become humanity's introduction to the cosmos, a simple warning that carried profound meaning. Earth would never again be an easy target.